I resonate with you just like I do with the other subject matter experts. I know that when you teach somebody, it's in the back of your head that I hope they never have to, but if they got to use this, I ethically have to make sure that this is absolutely 1,000% what I believe will get them out of that situation. I've never had a time in my professional life where Americans have been more concerned about their own self-protection. Krav Maga. There's all variations of people that train in it. And in part 3 of my conversation with Ron Engelman, we talk about that. And he is a great source for that. He is, again, one of Israel's top Krav practitioners and instructors. He's very active in the IDF. He's trained lots of active duty personnel. And in this one, we talk about where is Krav, how is it, and then how do you live life? How do you go through and make all these decisions? And what's the difference between military, law enforcement, and civilian application of this? Again, you're going to get a very unique insight with Ron, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed having this conversation with him. He's just outstanding. So without further ado, here's part 3 of my interview with Ron Engelman. But the last thing I kind of wanted to ask you about was, I mean, we originally got together after I did a video series on that people had asked me about the differences in Krav and how I approach it. And you and I had a great discussion, and I really enjoyed talking about that. Some people thought it was me trying to take a shot at Krav, and that wasn't it at all. I was just, asking some questions. Can you talk about, because I've seen it in lots of different markets. You see it in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you see it in anything that becomes, popular and within. There are the people that really teach it and really focus on what the intent was of the original, art itself, or program itself. And then there are others that, for whatever reasons, that they take a different approach, which is probably more commercially successful in some ways and stuff. And I'm not here to make the comments on that. What I'd really like people to get away with this is, I resonate with you just like I do with the other subject matter experts. I know that when you teach somebody, it's in the back of your head that I hope they never have to, but if they got to use this, I ethically have to make sure that this is absolutely 1,000% what I believe will get them out of that situation. Can you kind of talk to that aspect of things? Because I think it's really interesting. I mean, the history is amazing with Krav, and the dedication of instructors like yourself is awesome to see. And I'm really hoping that now things are clearing up. My wife most likely will have to go back over for a law enforcement conference, and I definitely want to come over, and I hope we can connect.
That'd be lovely. You know that you'd be very welcome here. So I guess, okay, so let's see how I can unpack that question. But so I think that you can approach, I think any training you can get is good. I think that if somebody takes a proactive step to go and learn how to protect themselves, that's already a very good step. Now, you don't need, the best instructor in the world to, don't look for, the highest level black belt when you're just starting off. That's nice, but you need somebody who's good at teaching, who's teaching beginners.
Right.
And then you go up. Hopefully somebody with a lot of experience also teaching beginners, and then you go forward. But I think that I'd say that Krav Maga, or any training system, you can kind of split into three parts that should all be there. The first part is the tools, right? Your punches, your kicks, your blocks, your throws. We spoke about anything that you do. The second part of that, the second component, is the techniques of how they all fit in, right? So if it's boxing, the tools are your jab, your cross, your hook, and your uppercut, and then your techniques would be your combinations or your footwork together with the combinations. You can be very, very good at punching, a bag without moving, but to be good, you want to incorporate that into a bigger sense. Or you might be really good at punching, but if you don't have the tools that are connected for self-defense, if you can't block a knife, if you can't deal with and move around with multiple attackers, just because you can punch very well, it's not going to go forward. And then the final step of that is the training methods. It's me putting you in the situations and as instructors. And I think that, not I think, where I've seen that some people fall short, and some criticism of, very valid criticism of Krav Maga, and it's not just Krav Maga, we see it in different martial arts as well, and specifically martial arts, not combat sports. They've got different problems, but in martial arts, it's that people get hyper focused about the techniques, right? So they focus on doing, it's almost like a kata, right? So I can have a kata and karate, which is a whole bunch of movements that are just linked together and I do on the air. Or I can do, a knife defense against a willing attacker, or a choke release, or a gun disarm, or whatever. A technique. It's a technique. Somebody puts a gun in my face, I deflect it, I strike the person, I disarm, I open up distance. This is all valid, but this is the technique. And where I've seen a lot of people fall short in the Krav Maga community is that they're hyper focused on the techniques. It's just on techniques. And then sometimes the tools are not as good. You can see somebody who can, move around perfectly, and they're very athletic. And one of the videos you shared, which is a different topic, but who is somebody who's incredibly athletic. And yeah. I'm not going to name, but if you've seen a video, he's running around doing flips, running over people, jumping on their head, disarming kicks. It looks like something out of a Jackie Chan movie. That's not Krav Maga. These are certainly no techniques that the stuff that in that video is, in all my years of training Krav Maga, I've never learned those techniques. I've never taught those techniques. And I think that if you brought it across, if you took it to 50 different instructors from different Krav Maga organizations, I think you'd have a consensus. They'd look at that and they go, I don't recognize that. That's not part of Krav Maga that I know. Right. Putting that aside, because there is a problem of people who, Israeli instructors who are very skilled. We had one who was a very skilled judo instructor, but there wasn't much of a market for what he was teaching in judo. And he started teaching self-defense. And he called it Krav Maga because there was a market for Krav Maga, but there was no connection between what he was teaching and that. Right. The Krav Maga is not unique in that. You have that everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I'm not talking about these people. I'm not talking about something that's not Krav Maga and presented as Krav Maga. I'm talking about legitimate Krav Maga schools that, maybe have heritage. Some people, do 10 years of training and a long certification course before they become instructors. And other organizations are not as, I don't know what the word is. The bar isn't as high. Some right. places
not as rigorous.
You can do a 2-day course and become an instructor.
Right.
Okay. Even those, let's put them aside, because I'm not talking about that. Let's talk about people who've done the miles and have seen that and have trained for years. People can fall short is they'll get hyper focused on the techniques. They'll do all the movements, everything on the syllabus, everything that's Krav Maga. They'll hit everything. They'll hit everything that the instructors will teach them, and they'll do the techniques well. But they'll fall short on one of the two sides. One side is the techniques, the tools, right? They can move well, but then when it comes to throw a proper punch, which is the foundations, they can't punch well. Because they've spent so much time on gun disarms and pistol disarms and multiple attacker drills. They can do a million things really well, or they can do a million things okay, but their basics, they can't do well. And I'd say I much rather you being able to punch well and being able to move well. And if you can do those two things, and you don't have to learn it, by the way, in Krav. You can learn how to punch and move well in boxing too, which is excellent. Absolutely. Boxing is the foundations of Krav Maga. You give me somebody who's a good boxer, and I can put on that infrastructure, Krav Maga, self-defense really easily. Boxing is not enough, because boxing won't teach you what to do if somebody comes to stab you. Boxing won't teach you what to do if somebody grabs you and tries to put you on the ground, or if somebody hits you over the head and now 3 people are kicking your head in.
Yeah.
I can teach you what to do there, but the foundations of boxing are excellent. So that's one of the places where people fall short, is they'll have all the techniques, they can do everything in the syllabus, but they can't punch, they can't kick good enough as they should in order to be able to protect themselves. So they'll block the knife perfectly, but then when it comes to punch the attacker so that they won't come in and attack, it won't work, because they haven't spent the time to get good at that. They've spent the time perfecting thousands of techniques. Right? Bruce Lee said, "I don't fear the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times." Right?
Right.
So that's that principle. But the other side of where people fall short, and this is probably the one that maybe is the biggest thorn in my side, the one that I have a problem, like that I really don't like where people fall, is that people get hyper focused about the techniques and not training it against resistance. That means not putting what I was speaking about at the beginning, and this is where I focus most of my training, is putting people in situations where they fail. I was just teaching a huge seminar in Madrid just a couple of weeks back ago, and the first drill I had high-level Krav Maga black belts that flew in from all over Europe. I had some very skilled people and also some beginners all in one room. We're about 300 more people and 350 people, I believe. And we do the first drill, and I gave instructions, and everybody got killed. And I knew that, like we were training with rubber knives, everybody got stabbed right, left, and center. And they come back after the drill. I pull them up, and with the next instruction, and I go, "I look at your faces. You don't need to tell me how you feel. You feel like shit right now." And everybody's kind of like that. And I go, "Excellent. That's exactly how I want you to feel right now. I want you to feel how all of you, that like nothing works." Okay. Now I'm going to give you some tools. And at the end of this workshop, you're still not going to feel that much better. You're going to feel a little bit better. Things are going to work. And this is where we always push our training towards. So this is the big part of what Krav Maga is. Krav Maga is not just the techniques. It's not just a book, it's a syllabus. It's a training methodology of putting people under stress, under pressure, putting them in all these different types of simulations and drills where they're going to have to rise up and find solutions themselves. And what I told people at that seminar, and what I tell people that they come to train with me, I don't know what the right answer is, how to solve. I know how I solve this problem, right? Problem, somebody comes at you with a knife, maybe they're bigger than you, maybe they're 2 people, maybe they caught you by surprise, maybe you got stabbed a couple of times before you even understood what was happening. I know, or I have an idea of how I'd solve that problem. I don't know how you'd solve that problem. I've been training martial arts since I was 6 years old, nonstop. I'm a Krav Maga black belt with many, many years of experience. I'm a combat soldier. I've been in combat. The way I solve problems is probably not going to be as applicable to you or to her. And what's applicable to this guy who's massive is not going to be applicable to the student training right next to him, and she's much smaller than him, right? And it might not be applicable to the law enforcement officer who has a certain amount of force that they're allowed to use. So I don't know how to solve your problem. I know how to put you in situations and how to give you tools that are going to carry across a whole broad spectrum, but you need to learn how to solve the problems on your own. And that's my job as an instructor. And that's the job of Krav Maga. And that's where people, and self-defense. And that's where people fall short, is they're like, here's a whole bunch of techniques and they should solve most of the problems. And now you're ready. No. There's this concept so my background besides Krav Maga, I've got a degree in psychology. Right. And there's this concept in therapy of stealing people's problems. And you should never do this as a therapist. This is the worst things you can do. You shouldn't solve other people's problems. You shouldn't steal that from them. I had a friend who was working in Lifeline, it's suicide hotline, and he was relatively new over there. A very good friend, a lot of life experience, and he had a caller. He was a regular caller, someone who was quite distressed, and he sat there with him an hour on the phone, and at the end of the call, this was actually, he was towards the end of his training, and he was being mentored. So his supervisor was listening in on the call, and at the end of the call, the person said, "Thank you. Like, I feel so much better. I thought I was going to end my life, and now, thanks to you, like, you've solved it for me. I can't ever thank you enough. I don't know what I would have done without you." And my friend felt really good, as you should, at the end of the call. He solved this person's problem, and the person recognized that. And afterwards, he came to talk to his supervisor to get his evaluation, and he got chewed up. What's the word?
Chewed out.
Correct. He got chewed out like nothing. He said, and the criticism was, and it was a valid criticism, it's like, you solved this problem. Well, good for you. You're a hero. But what's going to happen tomorrow when he can't call the hotline? You just took away his power to be able to solve his own problems. That's not your job here. Your job is to hear people out, stand by them, and help them and give them the confidence to work it out, find their own solutions. Because there's always going to be more problems tomorrow.
Right.
And that's our role as instructors. And it's so easy. Ego is part of it. It's so easy for me to come in and go, here are all the techniques that you need. I've just solved all your problems. I know everything. If you do all these techniques and you do them correctly and you train hard enough, you're going to be bulletproof. That's not how the world works. Right. And you're not helping your students. Yes, they all think that you're the guru because you know everything about violence and you have all the answers. But I know that I'm experienced enough. I've been in combat enough to know that I don't know all the answers. Oh, yeah. So I don't steal my students' problems. I don't pretend that I know what it's like to be a woman who weighs 45 kilos, whatever that is in pounds for your American listeners, who's walking on her own to a car park and somebody, I don't know what that's like. And I also don't know, I've never had to solve that problem. So I can't talk to you from experience. What I can talk to you about is from a very educated, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I've spent a lot of time talking to people, and I've got some tools, and I give you some tools that have worked for people in your situation. And then I'm fairly confident that would help you, but you got to test them out yourself. And you got to see, and more importantly, you got to have the confidence, because I can give you a tool and I can tell you, yeah, it's going to solve your problem. But if you've never experienced having to do that in a simulation, in a realistic simulation, you're not going to have the confidence to carry it out. So maybe you know what to do, but knowing and doing are two different things. And so the answer to that is, a good Krav Maga instructor, a good self-defense instructor can give you the tools and can give you the techniques, because there's certainly, you got to have that, but can also create the situations and create the challenges that are appropriate to your level and can guide you and can help you and can give you confidence as you get better at solving more problems and more difficult problems and more complex problems. And that's what the training is designed to do. Now, we've bagged a little bit about boxing and jiu-jitsu and the competitive and Muay Thai and the competitive sports, where they've kind of created the atmosphere, and not the atmosphere, the structure of which their tools work the best. And they don't go into the places where their tools don't work, because that's not the point. Right. Of a competitive style. Like if I'm practicing soccer, my point isn't to see, I'm not going to train soccer to see if I'm also good at basketball. Right. But if you look at how boxing works, if I want to be a boxer, I got to get out, and now my coach will give me some tools, right? I think boxing is an excellent analogy for this. My coach will give me some tools. They'll teach me how to punch. They'll teach me some combinations, but then I got to get in the ring. and I got to do those rounds.
And let it
And I
all
got to
fall
see
apart.
what works for me. I got to see what works for me, right?
Yeah.
And I got to work out my own style. He's a southpaw. He's tall. He's short. He's stocky. Everybody's going to solve the problem differently. And my goal as a boxing coach is not to say, this is how I teach boxing. Everybody's got to do it that way. I'm going to adapt. I got to be experienced enough to be able to adapt my techniques, but also to understand that I don't know all the answers. I'm going to put my fighter and give them the tools and help them together work out what works for them. And then they're going to face different fighters. They themselves are going to face big fighters, tall ones, stocky ones, southpaws, fast ones. And every time, and then with enough rounds, they're going to be very, very good at adapting their game. So that's certainly something that we need to take as self-defense instructors into that's certainly something that we can borrow, and we do, in fact, from the competitive aspects of it, is give them the tools, but also give them the rounds, give them the simulations so that they get really good at solving the problems. And unfortunately, that's something it's hard. That's why it's lacking in self-defense, I believe. Not because it's something that people don't want to do, but how do you safely simulate these situations that we're training for? How do you safely simulate? You're walking on your, in downtown Chicago, and all of a sudden somebody comes up and puts a pistol in your face. You weren't expecting it. How do you simulate, someone angry pushing at you, starting to get angry, and you don't know, is this going to turn out into a fight? Isn't it going to turn out into a fight? Can I talk my way out of this? Can I maybe show some submissive behaviors and get them, to back off? Do I need to make myself big and tall? All these things I'm trying to figure out. And then when fist starts flying, are they going to pull out a knife? Like, how do I prepare for such a complex reality? It's hard. And that's our job as self-defense instructors, is to give tools that are going to apply across a wide variety of situations, but also to put our students and create those simulations, whether they're soldiers, whether they're civilians, whether they're training with me for 10 years to get their black belt in Krav Maga, or whether it's a women's self-defense seminar that they're going to do maybe 2 hours. Or hell, I've even had soldiers that were brought to me by the commanders and say, okay, in between, we've got 20 minutes now. Can you put together a training session for 20 minutes? And then we're going on deployment, and it's very likelihood that somebody's going to get stabbed. And in fact, one of the company commanders did get stabbed, right? And was able to actually use some of the training over there. Probably don't have time to go into that, but phenomenal situation of, he was stabbed, was able to fight off the terrorists, was able to get control of him, take him down. These are things that it's not hypothetical. It's not in a movie. This is the things that we deal with. These are things that I deal with day in, day out. And that's the beauty of Krav Maga. If I came to you and I said, look, I want to learn jujitsu. Can you teach me some jujitsu to protect myself? I've got one lesson. You'd laugh me out of the dojo. You'd say, like, you want to learn jujitsu, it's going to take a couple of years, right? And the traditional system, I remember, if you're training Wing Chun, which is a form of Kung Fu, they say you got to dedicate 10 years to it until you can even think about using it practically. Yeah. That's not the case in Krav Maga. Yeah. If I have 1 hour for you, that's my job as instructor, to find something useful and to give you the condensed information that you need to be able to protect yourself. And that's why I love doing what I do, and I love doing it. I love Krav Maga's system. I love martial arts. I know that a lot of what you do is really focused on short courses. You're not teaching people to get their black belts. No, you're giving people the tools that they need right now, that if they have to use it tomorrow, they can.
Yeah, that to me is the challenge as an instructor. I love that challenge. I sit there and say, okay, how can I teach them something that's effective? Because I don't have time to make them efficient. Efficiency is if you want to continue training, we can work on coordinating you and making you move better. But right now, what I can do is I can give you something that it's effective. But I got to tell you, Ron, your concept, and I've never heard it put out that way for this context. and I will definitely borrow it, that idea of not stealing their problems, not stealing your students' problems. That is such a key thing for any instructor to hear. But we do it in our approach. We do it without saying it that way, but I think it would help clarity wise for my students to actually hear that. Because the worst thing, and it's funny, I was taking a negotiation course, and my friend Chris Frost puts it out, and his big thing is the worst thing you can do when you're presenting to a group is for them to say to you, "You're right." You're right. What you want to hear them say is "That's right," because when they say "That's right," now they've owned it. And that's essentially what you're doing. You're allowing people to, okay, I've given you all this information, but now here's your chance to own it. And I don't know how you're going to own it, because you're you. And I know what works for me, but my human machine works different. My approach, my experience, but here you've got all the tools, but now this is your work that you have to do. And it is true too. I think of all the years, the people and the feedback, people use the information very differently, for different aspects. I mean, they solve things in ways that I would never think of solving them. And it's interesting to take that approach. It's a really intelligent way of putting it.
It comes from, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's got to come from a place of humility. And humility comes with experience, right? It's often the blue belt who knows everything, right? And it's the black belt who understands how much more there is to learn. And if anything, I've learned is that, how much more there is to know. And I don't know. I don't know everything. I don't know how to solve every situation. I don't know how to solve, like you said, I don't know how to solve this situation for you. I generally don't. I've got some ideas, and I've got more than ideas, but I certainly have tools that go across everything that work in as much different environments as possible. But, one person, if I have somebody who's a black belt in Taekwondo and is phenomenal at kicking, am I going to tell them, don't kick? Kicking is stupid? No, you use what you know. If you're phenomenal in grappling, use that. We can build on that. That's excellent. Don't throw everything out. If you're big, use that. If you're small, nobody's going to expect you to be able to fight back ferociously. You've got an advantage over there. So everybody's got to understand where they're playing for, and also the situations are going to be different. And I think that's the problem. I think the problem is that instructors come with their syllabus and they go, you master this and you're bulletproof. And that's also what people are looking for, right? They want to find the right Chinese master with the long white beard, like in Kill Bill, who, if they go to the right monastery and practice enough, then they'll be able to defeat anybody. And the truth is, and you and I, we were talking about that when you came on my first podcast, is the understanding that you're vulnerable, and it doesn't matter how much training that you have, you're not bulletproof, and no amount of training is going to make you bulletproof. So you better keep on training, but also you got to be aware of your surroundings, and that's a very good. That's what we find in the military. The veterans, they take cover better. The veterans are better fighter, not because they can run. I'm not that old. I'm pushing 40 years old, but I certainly can't run as good as the 18-year-olds. I'm not as physical as they are, but I certainly have an understanding of the combat as a whole better, and I certainly have a better understanding of my mortality. Like when you're 19 years old and you're fresh out of training and you're going out, you feel invincible. That's why they recruit, by the way, people that young. You feel invincible and you have no responsibilities but yourself. I'm a father. Like when I go out into the war zone, I take very good care of myself and also of my teammates who are also parents of their own, because we understand what we understand we've lost friends, and we understand the dangers and what that means. And that makes us better soldiers.
Yeah.
Because we might not be able to clear a room as fast, but we're certainly more effective, and we certainly do that with lower lower risk to both sides. And we carry that off also as a Krav Maga instructor, as a self-defense instructor. There's definitely a benefit to experience and age. If you come to instructor, the older they are and the more experienced they are in various forms of martial arts or in their own martial art, they should be approaching it with more humility. They know that they don't have all the answers. And if you have an instructor who goes, yeah, I've got it. You got to do this technique. You got to do this. I know. That's when you got to start asking your questions.
I think that's the perfect place to end. That was outstanding. That is exactly what people need to hear. I can't thank you enough for this conversation. This is going to be really great. There, people really have wanted me to follow up on this, and you're the perfect person for me to do this. And thanks for giving us, the background of not only your family and everything, but also a background of what it's like to be an Israeli and what it's like to live in that. I always think it's interesting to get the best information from people that actually have to live in environments where that's a reality. And you certainly helped us today with that.
I just hope that I didn't give the impression that we were living here in a war zone, and that people are fearing for their life 24/7. It's every place has got its potential threats. Thing is, here in Israel, everything hits the news everywhere. Like everybody is exposed to what's happening here in Israel. But the truth is, we live our life. We live our life just like they do everything else. I lived for many years in Sydney, Bondi Beach, which is one of my favorite places in the world. I actually grew up in San Diego. So I've experienced I've been fortunate enough to experience living in many beautiful places. And I've chosen to raise my kids here out of all places, because I think I love it here. It's a beautiful place. And anybody who comes to Tel Aviv will know exactly what I'm talking about. And I love the values within my community here, and it's just a fun place to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, if I gave the impression that it was like that, I think what I appreciate about Israel is there's an appreciation for life and to live a great life, and with the underlying understanding that, hey, we may have to be called in to do that. It's I think it's a twofold thing. There's a sense of responsibility amongst the population. Population can argue amongst themselves, but will come together when the country needs to come together. It's just a great culture to experience. But yeah, I never hesitated when I was in Israel to ever think walking down a street or doing anything. Far more comfortable in the streets of Israel than I was in a lot of other places that I've been in, a lot of places in the U.S. So yeah, I would highly encourage anybody to go out and see your country, because it's just outstanding.
Oh, well, I'd be very happy to host you here if you get an opportunity to come here.
I'm probably going to take you up on that. I'll do that. But hey, again, thank you so much for this, and we will make sure everybody has great contact information for you. But thank you for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. It's always a pleasure.
That concludes my interview with Ron Engelman. We went the full spectrum: military, law enforcement, civilian application, Krav. How do you train? How do you look at training? What is your decision-making tree? I can't explain just how happy I am that I was able to get him on and we were able to coordinate this podcast. He's an outstanding individual, and I'm really hoping to meet him when I get to go back over to Israel. Now, for you guys, support Ron. He's got a great podcast. He had an amazing first guest, me. But no, he's outstanding, and he just is great. So it's all in our show notes. Please support him. And listen, also, if you want your own self-protection strategy, if you like what you hear right now and you're interested in taking care of yourself, your family, go to timlarkin.com, give us your email. You will get your free masterclass on how to put together your own self-defense strategy. Also, please subscribe to the channel. Please continue to support us. Hit the notification bell, make comments on the videos, and most importantly, Let your friends know this channel exists. That's how we grow. All the best.